You want us to send me with IFB? Yeah, because I'm just speaking to you on this phone. Is that? I thought that was my IFB. Yes. Yeah. So you just tell me when to wrap or whatever. Where are we?
On today's special election edition of Africa 54. As America votes for its next president, we'll have team coverage of the latest developments and a look at how the outcome might impact the U.S.'s relationship with Africa. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Now, well, it's election day in the United States, and the long, acrimonious and polarizing campaign for the White House is over, and voting is well underway across America. The latest polls show Democrat Hillary Clinton with a modest lead both nationally and in several key battleground states that will largely determine the outcome of Tuesday's election. In just a moment, we'll have live election day coverage from New York City, where both candidates will spend the evening watching the election returns. We also have reporters in Virginia and on Capitol Hill. But first, we'll begin with VOA national correspondent Jim Malone and more on the candidate's final push for support.
Hillary Clinton began her last day on the campaign trail in Pennsylvania, a state she's counting on to become the next president. After a long and divisive campaign, Clinton delivered a more upbeat message on the eve of the election.
Anger is not a plan, my friends. If we're going to harness our energy and try to overcome our problems, then we got to start talking to each other again. And we have to get good ideas wherever they come from.
Clinton got a boost Sunday when the FBI cleared her for a second time in connection with her use of a private email server while Secretary of State. Clinton had plenty of help in the final hours of campaigning, including from President Barack Obama.
God bless these United States of America. Let's go vote.
Obama rallied supporters in Michigan, where some polls show a tightening race. Republican Donald Trump began his day in Florida, a must-win state for him if he's to defy national polls and pull off a come-from-behind victory. Trump tried to turn the latest news on the FBI and Clinton to his benefit.
Hillary Clinton is being protected by a totally rigged system. And now it's up to the American people to deliver justice at the ballot box tomorrow. That's what's going to happen.
Trump also had help from his daughter Ivanka, who campaigned in Pennsylvania.
My father is very forthright. You know where he stands.
The outcome will hinge largely on voter turnout, says strategist Matt Gammon.
You need to remind people why the other one is a worse choice than you are. And it gives everyone kind of a bad taste in their mouth, and it's not what we like to think of when we think of how campaigns are run, but unfortunately that's just the way that this looks like it's going to end.
No matter who wins, the next president faces enormous challenges in trying to unify the country, says historian Alan Lichtman.
Assuming it's Donald Trump, he's got to way tamp down his rhetoric. He can't talk about locking up his political opponents.
But Lichtman says a Clinton victory would also be a test of her political skills.
She is going to have to come up with policies and programs that could at least attract a segment of the Republican opposition.
Democrats have shown some strengths in several states with early voting, but Trump supporters insist their passion will lead to a big turnout on Tuesday. Jim Malone, VOA News, Washington.
We begin our live election coverage in New York City, where VOA election correspondent Mary Alice Salinas is standing by. Hello, Mary Alice. Now, perhaps you are in the most exciting,
Good morning,
most
Vincent. This is the day. It is a big day.
Yes, looks like a little delay there. Now, Mary Alice,
who can tell how this will turn out at this point?
Yeah, it looks like, a very, very exciting day for most New Yorkers, but very significantly, this is the home state of both candidates. Tell me, how does it feel like to the voters there?
Well, actually, it has been, as one voter just told me, and you'll meet her in just a moment, intense, because it is very rare. I think it's only happened just less than a handful of, 3 times, I think, historically, where you had both major candidates in this one city on election night, and it has been such an intense campaign, such a divisive campaign, so much at stake. So you've seen both sides and that energy here really through the weekend, and lots of law enforcement. I'm at one of the polling stations right now, so people have been coming out, all day long, in and out. It has been rather, New York has seen a lot, and very calm, really, but there is a lot of excitement. One of the voters, Kimber, is right here with me. This is your first time voting in this city, is that correct?
In New York, yes.
In New York, all right.
Right.
Can you tell me, what were the issues that are most important to you as you cast that ballot today?
Well, obviously the presidential election, but just like economic stability and kind of confidence in the stability of our system going forward. I also come with a lot of international perspective. I've lived abroad, so to see how my friends are kind of observing this from the outside is quite interesting.
Right. We have a huge international audience, so the world is really watching.
Yes.
Being in New York at this time, also a very international place, what has it been like on this weekend, on this day? Really, the trajectory of this nation is at stake, and you're in the middle of it. What is it like now in New York as a resident?
It's been really intense, just the conversations going around. Sometimes I want to play it down and just let this be, a subsidiary of my focus and not be bombarded with all the media. So I'll be glad when it's over, I hope. But it's such a heartfelt issue for many people, and such a fear-based issue for many people as well.
It has been, and I've been in the city too, and you really have felt it. It's like a microcosm of what's happening around the country, and also actually around the world too, because there's a lot at stake and a lot of people are watching.
Yeah.
So
people sending me articles about what the stock market is predicted to do in either case, and some people planning parties. I was invited to an early morning party already celebrating for Hillary.
Both sides are, also the Trump side, they have their election victory party planned for tonight. I'll be at Trump headquarters later on today. We have somebody at Clinton's headquarters today.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it turns out. Thank you. You're a lovely
You're welcome.
person. It was wonderful meeting you, and good luck to you.
Good luck.
All right, Vincent. So, they're feeling it here like everyone else in the country, especially so. So voting will be all day, and we'll see how this turns out, Vincent.
Very, very fascinating, and we'll wait to see the results late in the evening. Mary Alice, thank you very much for your excellent reporting from New York. Well, now, Mary Alice is VOA's election correspondent reporting live from New York. For more Election Day coverage, let's go live to Arlington, Virginia, where Africa 54's Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick stationed at the Central Library polling station. And hello, Haiti. What are you seeing where you are?
Hello, Vincent. As you can see, there are no long lines here behind me. You know, it is a weekday. It is a work day for many. And of course, it's near lunchtime. So people are just very easily walking in and out. You're breezing in and out. We expect a little bit of longer lines later on in the day. But, you know, both sides of this election will be very interested to see who turns out the most votes. Voter turnout is going to be especially important during this election. Another interesting detail about U.S. elections is early voting. And so many Americans are able to go to these polling stations well before Election Day. They're also able to cast their ballots via mail. And this election cycle in particular has seen record voter turnout. We can now hear reports that more than 40 million Americans have already cast their votes before Election Day. And so voter turnout is going to be key. Both sides are looking at whether their individual strategies have worked. It is going to be ground game versus enthusiasm. The Democrats are feeling very confident. They say that Hillary Clinton has had a strong ground game. She's had an excellent turnout of the vote team throughout the country. On the Donald Trump side, they say their supporters are so enthusiastic they don't need to go knocking on doors. Their supporters will be motivated to come out and vote in big numbers. Two other words to really look out for during this election is going to be urban versus rural. Democrats tend to be concentrated in the cities and surrounding suburbs. That is where Hillary Clinton sees her support base. This is also where you will find more immigrants, more African Americans, and more voters with a college degree. On the Donald Trump side, Republicans during this cycle seem to have their supporters in rural areas and smaller towns. And so that is where Donald Trump sees his base of support. And I'm standing here in the battleground state of Virginia, in the suburbs right outside of Washington, D.C. It is in these neighborhoods that Hillary Clinton is hoping Democrats will outvote the Republicans here and throughout the state. Donald Trump is hoping for the opposite to happen. He's hoping that Republicans will outvote Democrats in rural areas and smaller towns and throughout the state. So it's really how those dynamics play out state by state that will determine which states go blue and which states go red.
Now, Haiti, we know that for a long time, Donald Trump has been saying that this election is rigged. What are voters telling you? Are they concerned in any way that perhaps their vote won't count?
Well, there have been very real concerns about voter suppression and voter intimidation. We've also seen the hacking of the Clinton emails and the entire WikiLeaks saga. But in general, the American voting system is quite resilient, and it works very differently than it does perhaps in other places, perhaps like in African countries where votes are counted in a very centralized place. Things here in this country are very decentralized. So votes are tabulated first at the voting location, then at the county level, and then at the state level. So experts are very quick to point to the fact that there are more than 3,000 counties in the United States, and you'd have to commit fraud in every one of those counties at a large scale for it to have any effect. And I don't think that is a real concern here today. Things seem to be pretty quiet on the surface, at least.
Haiti, as always, thank you very much. Great reporting there. That's Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick reporting live from Arlington in Virginia. Now let's go to Washington, D.C., where Africa 54's Esther Gidou is standing by live on Capitol Hill. Hello, Esther.
Hi, Vincent.
Now, you know, you're standing right there in front of the Capitol. This election is not just about the president. It is also about others. Can you tell us a little bit how significant that is?
Of course, both the candidates, Hillary Clinton and also Donald Trump, is concerned about how the chamber will be controlled. Is it the Republicans who will control the chamber, or is it the Democrats? For the most part, we know for the last 2 years or so, the Republicans really have controlled the chamber. And so it has been very difficult for President Barack Obama to pass some of the laws. So Hillary is hoping that even if she wins the presidency, she hopes that the Democrats will also take the Congress and the Senate so she can have some of the bills passed. With a Donald Trump presidency, he also faces enormous challenges because, as we know, there are about 160, maybe more, Republican leaders who have said they will not vote for Donald Trump and they will not support him. So it's not a straight win-win. Even if he wins the presidency, he will have to have a kind of a huge task to be able to rally the Republicans together. Like you said before, this has been a polarizing election campaign, and certainly Americans are divided at this point. All Americans are hoping that whoever wins this presidency is going to unite this country because it's so much polarized. So one of the issues that we're facing today is to look at the numbers and see who is going to control the House of Representatives and who is going to control the Senate as well, to make it easier for the next president to pass laws and to make things happen.
And indeed, a lot of healing to happen. But you've been talking to voters in Washington, D.C. area. What are the voters, particularly those of African descent, telling you are the important issues that perhaps have determined how they cast their vote today?
Very good question, Vincent, because I've talked to so many, as I reported for several affiliate TV stations that are affiliated to us here at the VOA in Africa. And some of the issues you hear from the African diaspora is who is going to take over the White House and how will that person enhance the relations between the United States and Africa? How will Africa do business with America? Some of the Africans tell you on the phone, and when you meet them visiting the U.S. Capitol, they tell you they're concerned about a Donald Trump presidency, for instance. They say, well, he has talked about immigration issues. They think he will shut the borders. He will certainly shut so many coming from Africa to the United States, either to study or even to work. Others are concerned, especially the Muslim population, which is huge in Africa, that if a Donald Trump presidency is going to be in place, then the Muslims might as well forget coming to the U.S. So those are concerns. However, most of them will tell you from the diaspora, especially people from Africa who are already American citizens and are voting, they want to see better relations between the United States and Africa. They want to see increased business. They want to see AGOA extension. They want to see people getting employment, some quite good partnership. And they hope that a Clinton presidency, who has been in business, so to speak, for about 30 years, will enhance what has already been put in place by the previous presidents, continuing to enhance the friendship, concerns, cooperation on security issues, and business and trade. Vincent?
Well, that's something we'll wait to see after the results and the next few weeks and years. Thanks a lot, Esther, for your reporting. That is Africa 54's Esther Gedui Yowan reporting live from the Capitol Hill. Well, now for some insight on how this election might affect the people of Africa, I'm joined by Washington-based Africa political analyst Amira Woods. Amira, welcome back to Africa 54. It's been a long time. It
has been. It's a joy to be with you.
And this election,
and on this day.
Now I get to see you on this day. Tell me, to you, I mean, you've been around for some time. Have you seen anything like this?
Well, Vincent, I remember I was with you a few years back when Obama's first term happened, and we were on election coverage then. And, it's quite a different election season that we've experienced now. It has been tumultuous, to say the least. Clearly, issues on both sides. What happens with the democratic process when, the FBI gets involved late in the season? What happens with the democratic process when a political candidate makes such outlandish statements about women, about Muslims, about basically, many of his own constituency in this country, and yet keeps rising in the polls. So I think it's a completely new arena.
And how about this charge that for many, many years, Americans are saying both candidates were seriously flawed, that they've been presented by two people that they didn't really think should be there?
Well, without a doubt, what you saw was a lot of enthusiasm for change. I mean, the Bernie Sanders effect that took hold, particularly with young people in this country, all around this country. You see a sense that the economy is not working for many people. The political process, the Black Lives Matter, all of these social forces coming together to say change is needed, and finding political expression for that has been really difficult. So I think there is some clear sense of, on both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats, that these aren't ideal choices, but they're the choices we have. And I guess I was actually surprised today to see the polling stations in Maryland, right, with long lines, longer lines than even during the Obama election time, quite frankly, at sort of my local polling station, and to see that I think the turnout today in many areas will be brisk, and I think that will have a critical effect on the outcome.
And that is key. Both candidates want voters to really turn out in big numbers. But many on the continent of Africa have been watching these elections very keenly. They're analyzing it. But throughout the campaign, there was so much vitriol. Do you think perhaps in that vitriol, in that acrimony, people may have missed out on really what is the substance? What is it that the two candidates really
Vincent,
bring?
it's like policy? What's policy? Nobody's debating policy. So I'm so happy to be with you today and to have opportunity to talk about policies in terms of how the U.S. engages with Africa. Because quite frankly, throughout this election campaign, we've seen very little substance. We've seen a lot of vitriol thrown from both sides, quite frankly, and it's left people tired. Folks are so ready for this election to be over, regardless of the outcome. Of course, people have their predilections, who they want to see ultimately as commander-in-chief, right? But I think overall people feel haggard and want it to be done. So I think overall there will be a need for real national reconciliation and healing after this process, as we've seen in many countries that have had some critical election seasons like this.
And again, to the credit of this country, and like a number of African countries, we're not concerned that the country is going to blow up into into flames just because one side wins. At least African voters and citizens will remember that this country will remain intact. Things will continue functioning even after tomorrow, regardless of what happens.
Well, that's the hope, right? But I think what you see are real fissures in the American electorate and in the American population. There are some serious divides in the demographics of this country that is becoming much more black and brown. So the kindergarteners, right, that those who started kindergarten this year are predominantly black and brown. So the demographics of this country are shifting. And so, when you hear we want our country back, it is these reminders that the country is changing in fundamental ways that, many of us recognize will never be back, So I think it's dealing with those changes, understanding the economic implications that brings, understanding the political ramifications of those changes. I think that's what lies ahead for whomever wins today.
And we'll continue this conversation. Well, we'll have more Election Day discussion with Amira Woods after a short break. Stay with us.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Somalia, officials say at least 25 soldiers were killed in a weekend fighting between rival Puntland and Galmudug regional forces in Galkayo. Sierra Leone marks a year since it was declared Ebola-free with a 3-minute silence. In South Sudan, a football fan fires on others watching a match in a bar in Juba this weekend, killing at least 13 people. In the Central African Republic, a customs post near Bangui, closed 3 years ago, reopens in a sign that peace is returning to the war-torn nation. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54 special coverage of the U.S. presidential election. Amira, now, before we went to break, we were talking about the significance of the African or the immigrant vote. And this, of course, combines the African, immigrants. You talked about the country, changing. The demographics are changing. The look and the color of this country is changing significantly. But, what are the issues that affect are important to immigrants any different than the issues of the rest of Americans?
The quick answer, Vincent, is no. The issues are the same. It is economic. Do people have jobs, decent jobs? Can they afford to put a roof over their heads, to send their children to school, to have affordable health care? This is consistent regardless of who you meet on any, whether rural, urban, throughout this country and really throughout the world. So, in terms of the electorate, I think it is still very much, it's, that mantra, it's the economy, stupid, right? Yeah. It is, in spite of the fact that, the substantive issues around the economy were even, sort of pushed aside in the discussions and debates.
Yeah, and this brings into focus another issue here. When candidates are campaigning, they have two things they have to achieve. First, to reach the American electorate on domestic issues. But they do go into foreign issues also. Now, when it comes to that, as far as Africans are concerned, do the issues that are important to those of us who live here, any similar to those of the continent of Africa, who are for some reason very interested in who becomes the president of the U.S.?
Well, who becomes the president of the U.S. impacts the entire world, right? I mean, the decisions made in this city. I mean, look, you have the World Bank. The head of the World Bank is historically selected, nominated, by the U.S. We hope that changes eventually, but that's been the pattern, right? So the decisions made in Congress also impact global economies, really, impact lives all around this planet. So clearly, when it comes to the global economy, when it comes to climate change, issues like that, where Africa is at the epicenter, right? As we have the elections today, we also have the gathering in Marrakesh, in Morocco, of the world coming together on issues of climate change, recognizing that Africa is at the epicenter already of the negative effects of climate change, right? So, it is these issues that impact Americans, they impact Liberians, Kenyans, people all over this planet.
But at the same time, you see, people are more concerned about what they heard. Some are thinking perhaps someone like Donald Trump hasn't spoken a lot about Africa. But going back a few years ago, George W. Bush didn't seem to know anything about Africa. But I think the verdict is in that he did so much for the continent. Up to today, many remember him as perhaps the president who committed himself so much to the continent. Do Africans have to worry about Donald Trump right now?
Well, we'll leave the debate around George Bush for another time. But clearly, I think, first of all, there are limitations to presidential powers. We have seen that both with the George Bush experience, with quite frankly, the Obama experience. There are limitations to presidential power. But whomever is in the White House sets the tone. Yeah. Right? And so having really a rational, reasoned person in control of U.S. foreign policy making across the board, having that commander-in-chief be knowledgeable about what the countries are, what the issues are, who the leaders are, in a substantive way, I think it enhances the engagement with the continent and with the world. Having an isolationist wanting to build walls, I mean, that has a different repercussion in terms of how the U.S. engages, and I think will also have repercussions for Africa.
Well, your final thought on the whole question of character versus the U.S. interest. Does it matter who is there, or is it about the U.S. interest?
Well, Republicans and Democrats, the course around Africa has been the same. We have to say there's a consistent pattern in the economies. So neoliberalism has remained, regardless of who's in the White House. U.S. Pursuit of this war on terror has remained. Democrats and Republicans, no matter who's in the White House, that remains. So I guess in a fundamental way, it is staying the course, regardless of who's in the White House. But a lot of changes around the edges. And many of those changes could be detrimental to the world.
But the U.S. has strong institutions. Things will stay intact in the U.S., but we probably will wait and see how foreign policy will be shaped. But what is it, one thing you think is the most important thing you're looking forward to be done differently, whether it is Hillary who wins or Donald Trump?
So as I said, I think politically and economically there will be a lot of more of the same, right? But the social things will be different. I think with a Clinton presidency, you will likely have much more engagement with women's organizations, with human rights groups. LGBTI rights those have been some of the issues on the social end that have come out of a Clinton State Department. More strengthening and support for the U.S. Agency for International Development, for diplomacy, because that was her perch. The Department of Defense will still be strong, I suspect, regardless of who's in office. Yeah. And I think with President Trump, there we say, clearly issues around immigration will be more harmful to Africa.
Now, we'll definitely talk more about this more tomorrow after the result. Thanks a lot, Amira. Well, thanks to Washington-based Africa political analyst Amira Woods for joining us today on Africa 54 special coverage of the U.S. presidential election. Good night.